But discrimination isn't always that obvious. It's sometimes more subtle, but in many ways more insidious. And institutionalized discrimination that's hidden behind a smiling face. Housing agents who say, well, there are no vacancies right now. That you just didn't qualify for the mortgage because your financial credit history wasn't good enough. Last year, the Federal Reserve Board found African Americans are denied credit for homes at twice the rate white Americans are. And it is pervasive. It's what we found in the banking case in Texas, SacuBank in Texas. Discrimination in lending, discrimination in rendering mortgages. The bank has agreed to change its practices, as you heard from the Assistant Secretary. The bank has also agreed to a $2.1 billion agreement where they'll make $2.1 billion available to families who are low and moderate income across the country for mortgages. About 15,000 low and moderate income people will now be able to buy their own home because of the settlement we announced today. $2.1 billion is by far the largest settlement ever rendered to the federal government to settle a fair housing case. And in closing, the message of today is clear. You've heard it from a number of us now. This is a nation of laws, and this administration will enforce the laws. We'll take questions at this time.
$1 billion is in the form of mortgages.
Yes, sir.
So this company will end up loaning this money and presumably...
So $2.1 billion that would not have been available to families of low and moderate income, low and moderate income families across the country. About 15,000 families we estimate will get mortgages who would not have gotten mortgages otherwise. But aggressively to take a greater risk on these mortgages, yes. To give families mortgages who they would not have given otherwise, yes.
Been able to get the loans at all. They wouldn't have...
They would not have qualified but for this affirmative action on the part of the bank, yes.
That minorities are represented in that low and moderate income group?
It is by income, and is it also by minorities? Yes. With the $2.1 billion lending that amount in mortgages, which will be a higher risk, and I'm sure there'll be a higher default rate on those mortgages than on the rest of the portfolio. That is the remedy that we sought, and the remedy that I would prefer. 15,000 families. This is of a scope so beyond anything that we've really done in the past. We had one settlement just a couple of weeks ago, which was part and parcel of this, which is in the range of about $1 billion. But
there was the Community Reinvestment Act, or CRA, passed in 1977 during Jimmy Carter's first year in office. The law increased oversight of financial institutions to ensure that they were giving credit to low-income families.
We're going to make sure those banks do it and they don't discriminate. But the law went overboard. Institutions made loans they probably didn't want to make because they couldn't seem racist. It empowered these community groups who would then bully the banks. ACORN bullied the banks.
Indeed, ACORN, the Associations of Community Organizers for Reform Now, would before long come up with a new tactic, challenging a thrift merger in Illinois, claiming they didn't make the kind of loans that ACORN felt were required under the CRA. A young community organizer named Barack Obama worked closely with the ACORN activists behind the new strategy.
I've been a community organizer and helped design programs at the ground level.
And that strategy worked. ACORN prevailed in court, and soon credit standards were being lowered across the country. While at first Fannie actually resisted buying up some of those shaky mortgages, at the tail end of the Clinton administration, Fannie Mae was told to substantially increase the percentage of those mortgages in its portfolio.
Acorn's attorney was, well, you guessed it, Barack Obama.
I have a background as an attorney. I've represented affordable housing organizations that build affordable housing, something that's a major issue in the district.
Back in the 1990s, they used strong-arm tactics to force banks to give high-risk loans to low-income borrowers with bad credit.
Acorn uses militant tactics. They call it direct action. Sometimes Acorn will actually send people to a bank official's home. They'll scare him. They'll scare his kids. Again, all in an effort to get the banks to make these bad loans.
You've gone back to Chicago and civic rights, civil rights.
Right. I'm currently a practicing civil rights lawyer, which means that I get involved in a whole range of different issues that touch on issues of race.
We look at the subprime mortgage fiasco that's taking place today. Subprime lending started off as a good idea, helping Americans buy homes who previously couldn't afford to. Financial institutions created new financial instruments that could securitize these loans, slice them into finer and finer risk categories, and spread them out among investors and around the country as well as around the world. In theory, this should have allowed mortgage lending to be less risky and more diversified.
Who do you think is to blame for this current mortgage and credit crisis? Who do we see about that?
Well, I think there are a lot of folks who have to take some responsibility. The original idea was a good one, which was, let's see if we can distribute risk more broadly and make it easier to provide loans to people who otherwise might not be able to get them.
Now, up until then, Acorn has managed to fly below the radar, but their dangerous practices are coming back to haunt them and the rest of the country. The economic crisis facing the nation is due in large part to this disastrous decision by financial institutions Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac to buy up risky loans from small banks. But it's groups like Acorn that force those banks to give out those loans in the first place.
What do you think of the Acorn scandal, and how do you think it will affect the election?
The Acorn scandal is a big one. Acorn has received over $760 million in fees alone. This is what we know about. And there's a lot of stuff that's still kind of bubbling up to the surface. But here's an organization that essentially helps strong-arm a lot of banks into making loans to people who couldn't pay them off, so the so-called ninja loans, no income, no job, no assets. At the heart of what has kind of brought about the financial collapse is this rather unconventional idea that we would just loan money out if a person had a pulse.
Financial analysts are saying that if mortgage giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac had been effectively regulated years ago, the supercharged subprime mortgage meltdown that led to the current financial mess would either never have happened or would have been nowhere near as severe. Chief White House correspondent Brett Baer rejoins us now to examine the timeline. What were those warning signs? Who raised them and who disputed them?
The Bush administration raised red flags starting in April 2001. The 2002 budget request declares that the size of mortgage giants Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac is, quote, a potential problem because financial trouble in either one of them could, quote, cause strong repercussions in financial markets. In 2003, the White House warning about Fannie and Freddie was upgraded to a systemic risk that could spread beyond just the housing sector. In fall of 2003, the Bush administration was pushing Congress hard to create a new federal agency to regulate and supervise Fannie and Freddie, both government-sponsored enterprises or GSEs.
We need a strong, world-class regulatory agency to oversee the prudential operations of the GSEs and the safety and the soundness of their financial activities.
But then Treasury Secretary Snow was getting a lot of pushback from then-ranking member, now chairman of the House Financial Services Committee, Democratic Congressman Barney Frank.
Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are not in a crisis.
In fact, Frank said the federal government should be encouraging Fannie and Freddie to do more to get low-income families into homes. And he believed too many people had a sky-is-falling mentality.
The more people, in my judgment, exaggerate a threat of safety and soundness, the more people conjure up the possibility of serious financial losses to the Treasury, which I do not see. I think we see entities that are fundamentally sound financially and withstand some of the disaster scenarios. And even if there were a problem, the federal government doesn't bail them out. But the more pressure there is there, then the less I think we see in terms of affordable housing.
The legislation was blocked. In 2005, Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan added his voice on Fannie and Freddie after Fannie leaders admitted major accounting screw-ups. Quote, enabling these institutions to increase in size, and they will once the crisis in their judgment passes, we are placing the total financial system of the future at a substantial risk. Adding later at another hearing on the topic,
if we fail to strengthen GSE regulation, we increase the possibility of insolvency and crisis.
But the two mortgage giants had staunch defenders. Democratic Senator Charles Schumer said, quote, I think Fannie and Freddie over the years have done an incredibly good job and are an intrinsic part of making America the best housed people in the world. If you look over the last 20 or whatever years, they've done a very, very good job. Senator John McCain co-sponsored legislation pushing for regulation, delivering a speech on the Senate floor in 2006. Quote, for years I have been concerned about the regulatory structure that governs Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. In the sheer magnitude of these companies and the role they play in the housing market, the GSEs need to be reformed without delay. That bill made it out of the Senate Banking Committee with a party line vote. All of the Democrats voted against it, but fearing that they didn't have the votes to pass it, Republicans didn't even bring it up on the Senate floor. Senator Obama did not weigh in on that bill. Brett.
All right, Brett, thank you very much.